Okay, I've been wanting to do this post for a long time now, and I'm choosing to do it on YouTube so it doesn't have to be fast. I can just kind of take a little bit more time, be more thorough, and try to be as clear as possible. But so often you've seen this running form or this mechanics, style of mechanics, is what people will promote. You'll see this up and down. You'll see this kind of vertical posture. You'll see them landing on the forefoot. You'll see the heel coming way up towards the butt. But I want to talk about two major problems with this type of mechanics. Again, it's not wrong. It could just be more efficient. There's wasted energy with this style of running. So I'm going to go over the two key concepts. Again, remembering that running in its most simple, basic form is just about moving forward. So anything that doesn't contribute to forward motion isn't necessary. Moving forward is like paying on the principle. The energy you're creating, you're expending, is like money spent or money expenditure. And if it's not going towards the principle of moving forward, it's going on the interest, up and down, twisting side to side, or braking and slowing. So I want to compare and contrast this gliding, where as much as possible you're moving forward, minimizing braking effects, versus upwards motion or bounding or braking that's associated with this style. And two little tweaks to this could make this a lot more efficient, lower interest rates, paying higher on the principal, make you faster and safer by having less braking, less slowing down. So of these you see on the left and the right is going to be on the left is this type of style that this bounding style. We're going to go over the two inefficiencies associated with that. Braking, number one, you're trying to move forward, and it's the way that you're landing and loading your weight through the ground, where that is in relationship to your center of mass, is slowing you down. I did a post recently visualizing this with a tennis ball necklace, how you'll see that when I land and load in front of my body, this kickstanding or overstriding or braking, the ball continues to move forward, but I slow down and I stay back. That's what is conceptualized, visualized by braking. So you'll notice that with this posture, I'm going to go over some of the different phases of running. So this is the first phase that I want to go over is with this braking, what you'll notice is that they're leaning backwards. And you'll say, well, how is that they're leaning backwards? They're pretty much vertical. Exactly. To move forward, we need to lean hinging at the ankles, where my body, it stays stacked in alignment, but I'm not vertical. If I'm trying to move forward in vertical, that means I'm usually arching my low back. I'm extending my spine, and you'll see the torso vertical. So I call this breaking back. So if you see someone that's vertical or this 12 o'clock posture, when you're watching them run from the side, if they're at 12 o'clock, they're braking, they're slowing down. The other type of braking and slowing down is that 1 o'clock posture or the hinging at the hips, which also keeps the weight, the center of mass back. It all has to do with your center of mass, your body weight. When you land and load through the ground, where is that in relationship? The further out in front, the more it slows you. The closer towards your center of mass, it minimizes braking and promotes this gliding. So what you'll notice with this braking is that when they're leaning back, they tend to land on the forefoot. In order to do that, I talk about this is like speeding up to a stop sign. You have to stop. You're going faster for no reason. If you are going to actively plant your ankle down, plantar flexion like you're planting a flower, if you're pointing your ankle down, one, that's work, that's energy expenditure. Muscles have to do that. But then you're making contact in front of your body. So if you look at where the point of contact is with the forefoot, in relationship to my body, my torso, my center of mass, the distance between those, how much further out in front it is when I make contact that far out, versus the gliding, Landing on the heel is okay. And we'll show when the weight is transferred to the ground. That's where it's the most important of landing on the heel, but then transferring your weight through the middle part of your foot. And when that occurs, we have more of this optimal alignment between your center mass and where you're landing. So look at the distance between, on the gliding, between where I'm landing and the center of mass. You see how it's closer, less braking. The further out in front of my body, the more it's slowing me down. The closer towards my center of mass, that's where it's minimizing the braking effects and promoting the gliding. So one, landing with the forefoot associated with this is braking and slowing down, which is not efficient. So if we move on to the next part of this, of we landed, made contact with the ground, but now when we're at this kind of this, what we call mid-stance position, where our height, our body weight is at the lowest point, arms are level and equal, and thighs are level and equal. I like to just say, forget this person's running. If we were to take this static image and just bring it to life, what would happen? Ideally, where our posture, where our weight distribution is, I should be able to bring this to life and they would fall forward. Look at the image on the left, the braking. If we bring this to life, falling backwards. Their weight's back, they're leaning back. So that's slowing down. We have to work against that, like running uphill. Versus the gliding, at this point, if I were to bring this to life, it would stay somewhat level and then start to tilt and lean forward. And all that has to do is, where is my weight? Imagine if you were standing on a raft in the water. If you were to lean back like that, what happens? You fall backwards. So we're trying to lean and have our weight such that the whole time we're having this promotion of this falling forward, this leaning, this minimizing the braking effects. Another way to visualize this, if I'm doing this on an app with vectors or just using cards, is ideally at this point, what can show this gliding is if we look at the torso and we look at the tibia, the lower leg bone, where are they in relationship to each other at this point, mid-stance? And you'll see, ideally it should be parallel and tilted forward. On the left with the braking, that top line is vertical. That's not consistent with parallel. And with the gliding, they're pretty close to being parallel and tilted forward. So that's how, if I'm trying to put a measurement on it or classify someone as a braker or braking, those are the two lines that I'll draw. Torso and tibia should be parallel. Let's move on to the next part of this. Another just way to look at it. Same exact picture, same exact position, but now instead of looking at the tibia and the torso, if we just look, where is the body weight at this position related in relationship to the base of support? So just like we said, if I'm on a raft where we just bring this to life, what's going to happen? Look at the difference of where the weight is on the left, behind the knee, behind the foot, versus on the right with the gliding, the weight is closer to the center of mass, closer to the base of support. So the difference being, where's the weight? This runner with braking, they're keeping their weight back. They're keeping their weight back. So again, that's leading to this braking. Again, just another way to visualize the same exact thing. One other way to look at it too is if we just look at just that torso, if we think of it just that way, we'll think about that clock. If we're vertical, then we're leaning back. We want to see that torso, or like that clock, be more of like this 12:30 posture. Not 12 o'clock, not 1 o'clock, but 12:30 to promote this gliding. So the next thing is bounding, blending, running and jumping. Running has got moving forward. This is one of the 3 learned skills, is to be able to leave the ground and move purely horizontal and not vertical and up. It's learning to not push down through the ground, which will then, every action equal opposite, will go up. It's learning to push the ground backwards to glide forward. So again, bounding is what's associated with this. And how we know this, if you look at the top of their head, the way that I would classify in the clinic is using slow motion. I would find this exact point. I'd go frame by frame, and I'd find the point where the runner's head is at its highest point. I call that peak vertical. At that point, ideally, the back foot is still grounded, just barely touching. And what that tells me is then when they go to then leave the ground, they're going to be moving horizontal, not up, because we found the highest point. Versus the bounding, at the highest point, their back toe is way off of the ground. They're jumping, they're leaving the ground and going higher than their height, which again is wasted energy. If we can convert that energy that it takes to do that, to raise our whole body weight up in the air, which is not easy. Think about going upstairs. What are one of the things that people lose as they get older? The inability to go upstairs, get out of a chair, the ability to raise your whole body weight up off the ground versus allowing momentum to continue to move you forward and just pushing backwards where you don't have to deal with your entire body weight of leaving the ground. So look at the difference between the distance between my knees on the bounding and look at the difference between my knees on the gliding. Ideally, we're pushing the ground back. We're extending that back hip. We're more push with a tush. We're using the glutes to push the ground backwards, not push down. So if you look at the difference, the energy that it's created to move up, if we transfer that to the energy to push the ground backwards, you'll see we're getting more hip extension. The best way that I found to conceptualize or visualize this is that paddle in a canoe analogy. To move forward, paddle in the water, I push the water back. That's like my leg on the ground, I push the ground back. It doesn't make sense to shorten up the push and then pick the paddle up out of the water every time. That's wasted energy. The further, the higher I have to go, the muscles, the hamstrings were being used to do that. It's a harder time to have a quicker turnover rate or meet the ground, which is where we get all of our force production versus in the air. The higher the foot comes off the ground, the more inefficient. But this is what we'll see based off of this lack of extension. We're not paddling as far back. So sometimes we'll have to take more steps just to get from point A to point B. And if I can get there in 10 less steps, 10 less repetitions, think about push-ups, 10 versus 15 push-ups. That's 5 more push-ups. So if I can get there, get the goal with covering more ground between steps, that's ultimately the goal. And I have other posts that I talk about when we see the heel come up, it's passive. It's not active. As a result of going faster and extending further back, when we bring that paddle forward, it does come up higher, but they're not actively trying to kick their butt. It just happens. And anyone that says to do that, and they're not doing it. They're not changing. When they run faster, they're not just suddenly changing their mechanics and start picking their feet up and trying to kick their butt. It's a passive experience. So I hope this was helpful to show the differences of how this could be more efficient by the simple fix is learning to lean, learning to where's my center of mass in relationship to my base support, learning to shift my hips forward, creasing at the ankles, hinging at the ankles, leaning at the ankles will allow this gliding to take place, minimizing braking, and learning to push the ground backwards to move horizontal. To learn to see this up and down motion that we see is more of this down up, this land cushion, return to starting position, versus up and then down. More impact, less efficient gliding. So hope that helps. Questions, comments, concerns, feedback, let me know.